We have a remarkable example of F around and find out coming to us from out of South Korea, where the repugnant internet prankster Johnny Somali got himself absolutely rocked by a South Korean Navy SEAL, and we have the video. Let's check it out. And for those of you who stay to the end, I'll share with you how you can join us for our 100% free Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict webinar coming up in just a few weeks. One downside of the internet has been the emergence of repugnant pranksters who act out in public in outrageous ways, specifically to prompt outrage, and film their theatrics for distribution and clicks and cash as online content. One such content creator goes by the name of Johnny Somali, though he's not in any way Somalian, and he spent some months getting himself into hot water, including jail time in Japan, where he was deliberately insulting the host Japanese for content creation purposes. After getting tossed out of Japan, Johnny Somali hopped over to South Korea to engage in the same kind of repugnant conduct for the same reason. But this time, when he effed around, he also found out, and I've got video of the found out to share with you. Before I jump in, I remind all of you that if you like this kind of content and would like more of it, pound that subscribe button and hit the like thumbs up. We really appreciate it. The video I'm about to share with you came to my attention through my good friend and fellow lawyer Jeff, who lives and works in South Korea. By the way, Jeff, who is a maritime lawyer, produces great content on his YouTube channel as @LegalVices and also on X as @TheLegalVice. I'll link to both of those in the description. It seems that Johnny Somali had been making a pest of himself in South Korea for some time and had attracted the attention of a number of, reasonably enough, offended South Korean content creators, and, more concerning, the particular attention of a former South Korean Navy SEAL. Yes, that kind of SEAL, high-level special forces. Jeff has been referring to this guy, the Navy SEAL, as Mr. A, so for convenience, I'll do the same. Here's a duty photo of Mr. A when still in service. So Mr. A has been on the internet letting everyone know that he's had about enough of Johnny Somali and was actively searching for him. Well, he managed to find him as Somali was exiting a building, and that's the interaction that was caught on video.
찍지 말라고.
There's Johnny Somali. The camera's being held by, there's Mr. A on the left.
소말리.
Follows him out of the building.
어디가?
He's asking them, where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going? In Korean.
소말리 어디가?
Yes, sir.
어디 가냐고.
You guys following me, crazy. Listen to you.
어디가?
어디가? What you mean? 어디가?
어디가?
What is 어디가? Oh.
Pop! Right there.
Yo. Please.
Goes in for a little more. And is quickly wrapped up by police. Now, my buddy Jeff seems to feel that Johnny Somali was knocked out cold, as he indicates here in this tweet. That might be, I'm not so sure, but certainly Johnny Somali was rocked hard. In a successive video, we can literally see him wobbling on his feet.
Oh, you crazy? You my hat. Come on in. Please. You my hat. 자, 이쪽으로 오세요. 거기. 너. 핸드폰이에요? 네? 이거요, 뭐죠? 제 거예요. 보실 거예요? 모자예요?
And there's Mr. A.
누구 모자예요? 주세요. 주세요.
By the way, if you're wondering how so many cops got to the scene so quickly, it's because the cops were already there. Navy SEAL Mr. A slugged Johnny Somali in the face hard enough to rock his world right in front of the police. He just doesn't care. Now, Mr. A was, understandably enough, placed under arrest for this assault. I'll circle back to that legal matter in a moment. Johnny Somali was also taken away by police, but he was not cuffed when he was put into the patrol car. I don't know how the South Koreans do such things, but in the U.S., the absence of cuffs would typically indicate that Somali was not under arrest. Perhaps he was being brought to the police station to make a statement or file a complaint or some such. Humorously enough, as Somali was being led away, the handcuffed Mr. A is calling out to him, "Have a good night, Somali."
야, 굿나잇, 소말리. 굿나잇. 굿나잇.
As Mr. A was being loaded into a patrol car himself in custody, he told a local streamer on scene, before being put in a police car, the former Korean Naval Special Warfare member who rocked Johnny Somali says, in the future, we will continue to deal with children like Somali in Korea. Don't mess with Korea. A local South Korean X account also posted on this, noting that Mr. A had already been released from custody and was getting plenty of love from the public. That tweet reads, Mr. A, who served in the Korean military UDT, that's Underwater Demolitions Team, or Navy SEALs, is free and was just live talking about Johnny Somali's incident. He was getting nonstop donations. This man is a hero. Love to see it. Now, let's turn to some legal analysis. Obviously, the striking of Johnny Somali by Mr. A was not anything we in the United States would qualify as self-defense, and I suspect the same is true in South Korea. In the U.S., this would be a simple assault, meaning a non-deadly assault, not likely to inflict death or serious bodily injury, and would typically be a misdemeanor. So punishable by up to a few weeks or maybe months in jail and a fine. For a first offense, it would be highly unlikely to result in any jail time. So this was a crime. Bad Navy SEAL, bad. But if the striking of Johnny Somali by South Korean Navy SEAL Mr. A was a crime, how could it be so emotionally satisfying? Because emotionally, we humans love the rough justice of F around, find out. Don't start none, won't be none. And what's called the educational beatdown, which really is what this striking of Johnny Somali is, an educational beatdown. If you're not familiar with the notion of an educational beatdown, the term was created by an expert in the physical and psychological aspects of violence, a man named Rory Miller. Rory has been a guest on my show. He's written a ton of books on various aspects of physical violence, and I'm a big fan of his work. I'm going to be citing here from a web article he wrote on the subject of the educational beatdown, the EBD, and of course I'll link to that in the description of today's show. So let's jump into what Rory has to say about educational beatdowns. He writes, there are places in the United States where if you do something rude and improper, you will get disapproving looks and people will whisper about you. They might snub you in the coffee room or not invite you to go bowling. Now, I would add this also, of course, applies not just to the U.S., but to the world generally. Rory here is describing what we might call polite or civilized society. And while we have less of that in America than we used to, it does characterize a large majority of life in Asian nations like Japan and South Korea. Continuing with Rory, he writes, and there are places in the U.S. where doing something that society considers rude will get you beaten without a second thought. And I would add, every culture has its limits, even the normally rather restrained South Korean culture. What Rory is describing as being rude is really the violation of a standard or norm of behavior within that particular community. Exactly the kind of conduct Johnny Somali intentionally and aggressively engages in when he's in Japan or South Korea for the purpose of content creation. One consequence of such rudeness can be the educational beatdown, the physical striking of the violator of norms by a respected member of the community that's being violated. Rory continues, generally, if you were just stupid and should have known better, the educational beatdown will be quick, sometimes just a single strike, almost offhand. It's a spanking between adults. If the recipient of the educational beatdown acknowledges that they were wrong, it's over quickly. Now, I would add here, of course, the striking of Johnny Somali was over quickly, but not because he acknowledged his wrongdoing, but because of the immediate police presence. This suggests that this particular educational beatdown is not, in fact, fully complete, something Johnny Somali should keep in mind. Continuing with Rory, he writes, if the victim does not acknowledge that they broke a rule, if they argue or get indignant, then the assault, the educational beatdown, will continue, will escalate. The person who delivers the educational beatdown is usually a respected member of the group, of the community, like here, where it's being delivered by a former South Korean Navy SEAL, Mr. A. Now, again, I'll link to this article by Rory in the description of today's show. Now, In the usual context, where the victim of the educational beatdown is themselves a member of the community, or at least someone who might be expected to return to engage with the community, the beatdown is generally truly educational in nature. You broke one of our community's standards of behavior, and we perceive that a quick, limited spanking will teach you to avoid doing that in the future, and it mostly works. In the context of Johnny Somali in South Korea, however, I don't expect that Somali is either bright enough to learn the lesson, nor that South Korea will fail to understand that this is the case. Because in the absence of learning, the educational beatdowns will continue, and perhaps even escalate to a level that's no longer merely educational. My advice for Johnny Somali then is to exit South Korea at his earliest convenience. It's the only prudent thing to do. In the meantime, it's my hope and expectation that Mr. A will be treated leniently for his criminal offense, given that he committed this very limited, simple assault in service to his community. Okay, folks, before I wrap up, I want to share with you how you can join us for our 100% free Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict webinar coming up in just a few weeks. This free webinar teaches you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself, your family, or your property. The webinar is live streamed by me. There's plenty of opportunity for live Q&A. Again, the Hard to Convict webinar is 100% free, but we do limit seats to allow for adequate Q&A opportunity with the attendees. So I urge you to grab your seat right now before they're all gone by signing up at lawofselfdefense.com/hard-to-convict. I'll close out by reminding you all again that if you carry a gun for self-defense, so you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill, then you also owe it to yourself and your family to know the law, so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca for lawofselfdefense.com.